Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's combination session, which is part of the virtual DLF Forum Sessions series this spring. My name is Ilya Kreymer, and I'm the program manager for conferences and events at CLEAR and DLF. I use she, her pronouns, and I am delighted to welcome you to today's session. Today's session is composed of 4 15-minute presentations. We'll hear all 4 presentations and then open up for Q&A. Feel free to put your questions into the Q&A module as you think of them. Q&A will begin around 2:05 Eastern Time and end around 2:25 Eastern Time. Before I invite our first speaker to introduce themselves and we start the conversation, I'd like to remind attendees that we'll be following the Digital Library Federation Code of Conduct, which we'll place in the chat. And our first speaker will now introduce themselves and we will get the session started.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Leah. My name is Todd Digby, and I'm just going to get my screen shared here for everyone to see. And want to welcome everyone here and thank you for coming this afternoon. My name is Todd Digby. I am the chair of Library Technology Services at the University of Florida Libraries. I've been here since 2016 in this role. And one of the roles that I have as department chair is to oversee our digital library infrastructure and development. My unit does not do the actual scanning or digitization processes, but we handle all the actual the back-end systems, production systems, and digital library systems. So today I'm going to just have a bit of a discussion about how we went from our old system, which was a little stagnated and old, into our new system, and what some of the challenges that we faced, and then some of the opportunities that this actually presented for us. Just to give you a bit of a background, the University of Florida began digitizing in the 1990s and launched UF Digital Collections in 2006 as a system. Since the system started, it has grown more to over 16 million pages of content, and this includes multiple content media types, including text, images, audio, video, maps, newspapers, so a little bit of everything. The system also supports content in multiple languages, and the Digital Library of the Caribbean has interfaces in English, Spanish, and French. We are the home of the Digital Library of the Caribbean, so that's why it's part of our University of Florida Digital Collections, but it's a standalone system as well. As we developed, the system grew in complexity to accommodate the unique characteristics of these various types of media. It also was tweaked for the various user search needs, and then, as different people were involved, they had different content desires. So that old system was tweaked since 2006. It was originally the old system was powered by open source, what we call SOVEC CM system. The system was originally developed here at the University of Florida and is run on Windows-based servers. Over the past decade, there have been minor incremental system updates, but the interface essentially stagnated. Unlike many systems today, the old digital library system was one single system that powered both the search front-end interface as well as the back-end digitization process and management. Additionally, the original developer of this old system had departed the libraries and the university a number of years ago, so this also slowed down any enhancement and changes to the system. The system has served the library and its users well for well over a decade. In recent years, it really did start showing its age, and change was desperately needed. And it was even noted by some of our granting agencies that you need an update if we're going to give you more money in the future. So we also were driven to let's really redevelop our new system. The one thing also is really an important process, since it became, it was one of these, like many digital library systems, it started small, but as it became, it really, with the number of pages we serve and the number of visitors we have every day, it was a critical system, and everything being on one platform, the way it was architected originally, meant that we had a single point of failure, both our production system and our interface for the front ends. So we really were driven to make some changes. Like I said, it was time for a change. It was not mobile responsive at all. 2006, you develop for the desktop. We haven't done that for quite a while now, but our system remains not mobile friendly. There was also a list of backend enhancements. Like I said, it was really hard to, we didn't really have a developer that was familiar with the system, didn't have that historical knowledge. And so we sort of had a growing list of enhancement requests that needed to be done. Basically, we had accumulated a lot of technical debt in our architecture and our system. We did migrating to another open source system or commercial system that was available. We examined all the possibilities, but given the variety of content and media types, as well as how our production system was used and integrated, we really didn't see a clear solution for us to easily adapt or migrate to. So we did decide to actually rebuild our digital library system in-house. And so, we also had to develop this minimal viable new system to be done really while the current system continued to operate. We couldn't take anything down with any interruptions. Plus, we had ongoing grants. So the production system being intertwined, we had to keep loading materials as we tried to build the new system and development went on. Additionally, this is an interesting slide. We had learned over the past few years that it was difficult to find developers that were familiar with technology used in our existing system. It was an older Windows-based system, and that we need to focus on building a system that use today's technology and developmental standards and code bases as we brought developers on. Staffing the unit has really been a challenge over the years. Our unit consists of a unit manager who reports to me, but then we have what we sort of generally say is 2 backend developers and 2 front-end developers for the new system. And really we had consistent turnover from all of 2018. I just went back that far. We kept losing people. We were always in the mode of searching for developers and hiring. And we just kept on this process. It was really a roller coaster system. And this also meant that we lost any kind of institutional knowledge of that system. Not only did we lose, the original developer, but as we brought new people on, they would start learning it, and then they would lose them. So we lost those abilities as well. So you can see from these light green arrows in more recent years, this is sort of the permanent staff that stayed with us. We were happy to build a team that did stay with us, but really since the spring of 2020, sort of more summer 2020 to the present, we have a totally new development team that has worked on the system. And that's really when we started working on the new system. So it's been a challenge, but they're a great team and they actually coalesced really well. But the interesting thing is none of these people that we had hired had ever worked in digital libraries before or libraries before. We all got them as developers that worked in other sort of programming type positions or straight out of school in a couple of cases. Although the old system has adequate backups and a preservation system in place, it's just that lack of redundancy was really important for us. And we were thinking, how would we go about doing this? Fresh system. We knew we couldn't take the old system down, so we really decided that we had to focus just on presenting the new front end system. We're going to rebuild the front end system while leaving the back end system in place. We could use that back-end old system to feed the data to the new system. This did involve building new API environment that we could feed from. It also gave us the opportunity to move from a Windows-based system with IIS and Microsoft SQL Server to a Linux-based architecture, which involved Postgres, a database, Elasticsearch as our search, and Nginx as sort of front-end framework. We really wanted to keep the developers focused on the new system and not have them learn the legacy code base of the old system. So we really put on hold anything that involved the old system just to focus on the new system. Additionally, this gave us the opportunity to really look at our collections. We had to clean up our individual collections that got made over the years. We had over 900 of these, and we were able to go back to our librarians and others that manage these and said, let's see if we can bring these back down to a reasonable number. And we actually did bring them back down to under 500 collections in the end. Well, really what we also started looking for objectives within this minimal viable product that was really set on building those system core components. So the search components, the record display and viewing, we really wanted to start with the basic new system. We intentionally did not rebuild all the components from our old system. And because we really wanted to give this time as a period to examine user needs and then iteratively develop and bring back features as needed. We wanted to prevent feature bloat and limit as much as possible any kind of bespoke features that had accumulated over the years in the old system. In under a year from when we started, we actually launched our new patron system. So we launched this back at the end of 2021 in a beta form. So we were able to actually bring about a new system within a year, really focusing and not letting that team get distracted by other priorities. And we were able to release it in, like I said, beta form. We went from beta to not beta right now. It's really our production system. And at the same time, we also, it brought us about the ability to, we had the University of Florida Digital Collections, our main system, the Digital Library of the Caribbean. And then we also, this gave us a chance to really do another front-end portal, which was the Florida Digital Newspaper Library, which was actually just a thumb collection before of our system. Now it actually has its own portal and user, because newspapers do have, we really found that they had enough unique search and navigation needs to display newspapers and how they are organized and categorized, that having its own system just really made sense for its own front-end portal. So although these portals look really similar, they all have uniquely different, they function slightly different. They have the core components same, but we adapt them as needed. But needless to say, we have continued to have a list of future requirements and enhancements that will just keep ourselves busy for years to come in the interfaces. But at the same time, we're at the point now where we're really saying, you know, what's next? And what's next is we really want to get off that old system completely, which means we have to relook at that production backend, the digitalization tools and workflows. So that's what we're doing right now. As we make enhancements and tweaks to the new front end, we're also developing new backend tools with modern frameworks and different, you know, we learn many things from old systems to do and try to implement them now as we come. We have a list of requirements, things like, boy, we really need better logging tools, see who did what when. So guess what, you know, one of our main things we have here built into everything we do now, and the new tools for the production is logging tools. So we log everything. But as we build these tool sets out, it's really given us a chance to work with the production team, our digital support services team, on what their needs are, what their workflows, and really help us adjust and update tools that really as antiquated as actual the old system itself. So any other auxiliary tools that were developed. And that is my presentation today. I just really could not be happier with the progress that the team has made. I think it was a rich and rewarding experience being able to hire folks in, use their skills in these modern tool sets to develop it, bring in their knowledge, but then also put the layer of librarianness to the system on top of that once we had that built. So I will, like Leah said, we'll save questions to the end and then the Q&A, but I wanted to thank everyone. And yes, I enjoy any questions you might have.
Great. Thanks so much, Todd. We can move on to the next presentation.
Hello, everyone. We will just share my screen here and be good to go. Okay, so I am David Satten-Lopez here with Avis, Wanda, McClinton, and we are going to be talking about our project called Manumitted, the People Enslaved by Quakers. To begin, we wanted to do a land acknowledgement here. We acknowledge that the land we are on today, both ceded and unceded, belongs to the Lenape people, whose presence and resilience in Pennsylvania continues to this day. We also acknowledge the enslaved Africans who worked this land and built the city of Philadelphia and the surrounding areas. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live on this land and understand that acknowledgement is not decolonization, and decolonization does not exist without the rematuration of indigenous land and life. Thank you.
Hello. Outline. Brief overview of project, user-friendly collaboration, next steps for the project, psychological tools, Avis's, Wanda's story. But one thing I want to say, we're going to be talking about slavery, so it might be uncomfortable for some people?
Right, so our project centers on Quakers and slavery. And so this project began in 2020 when I was working at Avis College. I currently work at Rowan University in New Jersey, but these documents around Quaker slaveholding are all stored in Haverford College's archives, and they mostly have to do with the Mid-Atlantic region. So we're thinking some New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware area. And I think what was pretty exciting about this project was that for a long time, the narrative around Quakers has been a long history of abolition and a long history of being against slavery. But right, the fact that they have these documents releasing people from slavery also shows that they did own slaves. So it is really beginning to trouble the narrative around Quakers as abolitionists. And it's really exciting to begin to explore the Quaker archives more.
This is Jack's manumission, and a manumission is the legal document and the act that promises freedom to the enslaved, either immediately or at a later date. This promise may not have been kept. The Religious Society of Friends, Quakers, and I'm a Black Quaker, American Black Quaker. It really was a means of control and domination. If you remember, in these times, a Black person was considered property. You didn't make a contract with a piece of property. So it was a promise not to be disobedient or whatever you would call it. And they wrote this fancy document up for Jack.
Right, so this manumission document is a legal document. It's fill in the blank here. And from these documents that we had in the archive, we began to kind of get a sense of who were in these documents. And in that way, we then turn that into a spreadsheet to be able to view many manumissions at once. And once we get a sense of kind of who's in the archive, we are hoping in the future there'd be a potential to explore what happened to these people, if we can find them in census records later and so forth. So from the manumissions themselves, we were able to find, the name of the monthly meeting that Quakers attended, the date at which the manumission was signed, which is going to be different often than the date that the person would be granted freedom. Often freedom would be granted around the ages of maturity at the time, which for men was 21 and women 18. And then we also have what we assume to be their gender, just from maybe the slaveholder saying, my slave boy, my slave girl, or their name. We have the township this took place, the name of the slaveholders, the name of some witnesses. But really, the information is somewhat sparse. It is a legal document, so it's not deep narratives about who these people were and their life stories. So to zoom back in on Jack, this is kind of Jack's area in the spreadsheet. Right, he was, listed in the manumission at 18, but would be freed 3 years later, presumably at 21. There are at times mentions of people who seem to be the same person being manumitted multiple times in the records, which is why we think that maybe sometimes these manumissions were not as legally binding as we thought. They were not kept as promises, but that would again be something to do further research down the line in the archive.
Now, for me, this page was so earth-shattering for me, is that we have all the information we have here to find what happened to Jack. We know what he let him off at, the Place Township, Cheltenham, Pennsylvania. This is where we are in Pennsylvania. The slaveholder's name, most times they would take the slaveholder's last name and the people around. But mainly what it is real evidence that this person was, or these people were enslaved by people that call themselves Christians, and our motto is, I see the God in you, but they didn't see the God in these innocent men, women, and children. And that's very upsetting to me. This has been a labor of love for me because it's my ancestors. These were innocent people stolen from Africa and exploited and made a whole lot of money for a lot of people. And because we in Philadelphia, this is the beginning of America. Now they tore down the statues of the Confederate soldiers in the South. Well, we here in the North had slavery. William Penn was a slaver. They could take it down off the City Hall, the top of City Hall. William Penn died in debtor's prison. He's not somebody I would want to look up to anymore.
And so from these records, once they were digitized and lots of metadata was created around the records to hopefully increase, access to that information, make it more legible, pick out important details from the manumissions themselves, we sought to create a website for these to live at. And I will drop the website in the chat. Strictly speaking, the website is not a minimal computing project, though certainly informed by minimal computing. My time at Haverford was a 2-year fellowship. So again, something that we wanted to build and have stable for many years after, because we weren't going to be sure this would be constantly updated. Moreover, we wanted to think critically about our own collaboration between Avis and I. At the time of beginning our friendship, we were working in different places in the city. It was COVID, so we weren't necessarily meeting in person. Avis was using her phone to navigate most of the website, which wasn't ideal. So I began to kind of create the website in a more physical format. And we would send letters of printed out versions of the website and then talk on the phone about what we were looking at to try to get better edits of the website, because just using the phone and not using a laptop or a PC to actually be able to give feedback was not going to work. And so part of the changes that came about through our collaboration was changing the name. That was a big one. Initially, we had Manumitted, the people enslaved by friends. And this was a pretty common, nickname for Quakers in the area, but Avis made it clear that, that wouldn't be legible to many people. And so really wanting to name Quakers as the slaveholders was important. So we changed the name to Manumitted, the people enslaved by Quakers. And so throughout many of the kind of decisions of the website design choices, we really wanted to think of how folks who may have limited access to technology might engage with the site and be able to still have access to that information, even if that meant contacting us and wanting a physical version in the same way that I was communicating and editing with Avis at the time. Lastly, we have other physical kind of artifacts from this process, one of them being this large poster here of Jack's manumission. And so this poster has become pretty important, I feel like, in showing the information to folks when we do go out and present it, and has become a point for I think a lot of people who are beginning to come into this project, as a point of something that's sacred, something that is important and really very full of emotion. I don't know if you want to say more about the poster.
I've never been to college, and I'm so happy and proud to be pulled into this endeavor. But when I was reading their words, the academic words, and I was asking David and had the college, are you making it for more academic people, or are you making it for regular people to read? And some parts of this, they had to come down on them 40 syllable words to say something with 3 words. And I feel rather proud of what I put into here. Now this is where I come in at, y'all. A little bit after Floyd got murdered by the policeman, they called me in to blacken up this research, because at that time the whole world was in uproar. So I said, when it's time to reveal all this 2.5 years of work, bring it to the descendants community in my backyard. And made about 50 pretty invitations to Black people, Black Americans, but they didn't come, only one, the lady in the red top. and all the rest of them was white people, which they needed to know the information. They didn't know it either. But when I called the Black people that I invited, why you didn't come? Nobody wanted to hear this hard, real information with a lot of white people around, so they didn't come. But they have stopped at my house and look at my mock studio with things about Quaker slaveholding heritage. So the next step for me, David is finished with his stuff at Haverford with this project, but I just couldn't let it sit there. The Religious Society of Friends been here since October 27th, 1682. And 339 people are the ones that got manumission. Can you imagine the tens of thousands of unknown Black people that were in bondage? A lot of people didn't know. I didn't know that Quakers were big time slavers. And in Pennsylvania, where I'm born, raised and born at, I think that's horrendous. I was real upset. Here I'm in the meeting house with descendants of enslavers and me. And I often wondered, what were the early Quakers sitting in the meeting house thinking when they were being God with my people? And so a group of people on this slide that you'll see, they're Black and white, very well schooled and not so schooled like me, slaver families and descendants of slavers. And we want to see what happened to these precious 339 innocent individuals. Did they get out to be free? I asked Haverford, did they give them money, land, a way to Canada to be free for real? None of that happened to these people. When a person got released, they didn't go nowhere. Their family was still stuck in bondage. And it kind of hurt my feelings.
So another thing to talk about here is, right, like, I think it's the psychological toll and the emotional toll of doing this work that has wanted us to continue to try to find out what happened to these people after they were manumitted, if they were manumitted. And so this is, again, kind of like an image of in the backyard at Avis's house when we did do that community share out. An installation Avis made to really show kind of like the brutality of slavery, to show the space someone would have during the Middle Passage. So in that vein, you know, we want to continue to find out what this work would look like, how to use this platform and website as like a catalyst to continue finding out about these folks and sharing out this information. In that vein, these are the names of all of the people who were in the manumission documents. At times, you're only going to have unknown child or children, because that's all that we have in those documents, but really wanting to bring them front and center to the presentation, and have their names out here.
I asked David to put the names up because I want y'all people that's sitting there listening to us to know that these were real people just like you that loved, cried, hurt, had dreams. And we don't know how many of these people were biological children of the slave master or the slave lady, because a lot of these papers showed women as holding people in bondage. And I've at my meeting in Philadelphia yearly meeting, I see the descendants of these people that were slaveholders. And I know that they got blood on their hands. To enslave a person, what did they thought? I'm not inferior. Avis Wanda McClinton, African-American Quaker and founder of Honoring Those Known Only to God. This is what I founded, and I've been going around the United States finding the enslaved grave in Quaker meeting houses. And right there at the reveal, I was pouring libations for the people. And that was a very emotional time for me. My quote with this project and going forward is, early Quakers were merciless thieves and shameless hypocrites who brought white supremacy to what has become America. Avis Wanda McClinton, Quaker preservationist.
Thank you all for listening to us and learning about this history. This is our emails. You know, if you look to contact us, if we don't get to something in the Q&A, we'd love to hear from you if you'd love to learn more about the project. But otherwise, yeah, thanks for listening to Avis and I, and really looking forward to the Q&A. And Avis is going to say something.
Thank you all for feeling me. If you want to know some of the challenges and barriers and things, you can Google me. Everything I do, I've been trying to put it on video for the next generations to come to see what I had to go through. Being a Quaker and dealing with this kind of information has put my life at a little bit of a risk, and it's not comfortable. Oh, one other thing that I forgot to tell you, our ad hoc group, we got Howard University is going to do our research for us. And I'm so glad it'll be Black students learning about their real history. And I hope I don't run out of minutes, but after Philadelphia yearly meeting, I'm going to New England yearly meeting. I'm going to New York yearly meeting. I'm going to Boston yearly meeting and find where their enslaved people are. So I have a lot of work in front of me. Wish me luck and Google me.
Thank you so much. Gonna get ready for the next presentation.
Hi, everyone, and it's a real pleasure to be here at the panel today with Chris and Avis and David. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was really moving. Chris, I can go ahead and share screen if that sounds good and give a quick introduction. Let's see. There we go. So today, Chris and I will be talking about Newspaper Navigator, in particular, around this idea of both hosting the data set and deploying the search application. For a little bit of context, I'm Ben. I'm finishing my PhD in computer science and engineering out at the University of Washington, and have been really fortunate over the past few years to be able to work closely with the Library of Congress, starting with the Innovator in Residence program, where I began the project Newspaper Navigator with Library of Congress Labs team, the National Digital Newspaper Program, and with Chris Adams here in IT Design and Development. And Chris, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself too, of course.
Thanks, Ben. I just wanted to second thanks to the previous speaker there, Avis. That was incredible. This is one of the most meaningful talks I've heard at a conference like this. Anyway, I've been at the Library of Congress for about 10 years. If you recall some of the other projects we've had, like the World Digital Library or Chronicling America, pretty much everything I do has been devoted to putting public information online and helping researchers find it. So I've been very happy to help them with this project of making the newspaper collection more accessible and available to anyone curious about our history.
Perfect. So I'll go ahead and give a little bit of an overview of the project for a couple of minutes, and then Chris and I will send it back and forth where we talk about some of the nitty-gritty about making the project actually publicly accessible and usable. And so the project Newspaper Navigator really has its origins in a crowdsourcing initiative launched by the LC Labs team back in 2017, known as Beyond Words. And the goal of Beyond Words was to ask volunteers from the American public to try to engage with the really rich visual culture appearing in at the time, tens up to 16 million digitized historic newspaper pages within Chronicling America. And I had encountered the project soon after it had launched and was really captivated by the kinds of visual content that volunteers had identified. some of which is being shown here on the slide. And when the call for concept papers for the Innovator in Residence program came out in 2019, my mind really jumped back to Beyond Words and wanted to ask this question of how we might begin to try to extract this visual content at scale, and to borrow some language from the Library of Congress's digital strategy to ask this question of how we might begin to quote unquote throw open this really rich treasure chest. And so the idea of the project, generally speaking, was to start with these raw newspaper pages as shown at the top that have been digitized, extract all of this visual content, produce what we call the Newspaper Navigator data set, then reimagine search and discovery with a sort of fully articulated search interface with new modes of searching as well for this platform. And so I think this is a really welcome opportunity for both Chris and myself to talk through some of the questions about making the project accessible that don't really necessarily show up on my side in sort of the academic computer science context. And so I'm particularly excited to talk about the sort of operational side of this. For some context behind the construction of the data set, the idea was to train a machine learning model that could recognize visual content on the page. So feeding in these newspaper images would return these bounding boxes, showing us not just where visual content is on the page, but also classifying it. So thinking about categories like photographs, illustrations, maps, and beyond. And as a sort of brief pipeline in terms of how we began to build this out, the idea was once we trained this visual content recognition model, we could basically use the really robust Chronicling America API, which I highly recommend taking a look at. It's really a fantastic demonstration of what can be done for digital collections. And the idea is we could take for each newspaper page, the scan and the corresponding OCR, run this visual content recognition model on the page and save all of the visual content, extract OCR falling within each bounding box to effectively give us some form of caption, generate what are known as image embeddings on the machine learning side to allow us to do some visual similarity and save all of this. And then the question became sort of how do we actually get this pipeline running at scale? And at the time was able to process about 16.3 million pages in Chronicling America. And so much of the code development around the sort of late 2019 into early 2020 really was about getting the pipeline up and running. But then we encountered a whole series of other questions that emerged. Once we had the actual data set itself, how do we actually begin to serve this to all of the users of Chronicling America? And in particular, I think there are really two framing questions here. And maybe this is where I'll go ahead and pass it over to Chris.
Yeah, so the challenge that the library always has is we have enormous amounts of data, and the trouble, we want to make that accessible to the public. We want to provide a high quality, very fast access to that. But we also have to deal within the normal institutional budgeting. And one of the challenges that we have is making sure that we don't create a situation where one researcher writing poorly optimized code can create a budgetary problem for us. So one of the things that we were trying under the labs umbrella was basically to see if we could make something extremely friendly to researchers who are used to working in the cloud, but also avoid that potential blank check on our part there. And so with the Newspaper Navigator, we tried hosting it in two ways. One was that we provide direct access to the S3 bucket with this collection available, but we used Amazon's requester pays feature. So you can access it as many times as you want. It's between you and your grant funds and AWS at that point, not something that we have to worry about. So we just pay for the storage cost. And then the other part that we wanted to do was to make sure that for normal usage, which tends to be much less data intensive, there we wanted to make sure that everything was still available. So there wasn't a two-tier system, but it was really just the convenient fast path for researchers who are possibly working in a computational environment with loading the same data over and over again. That is something that they can worry about, and they have full control over their bill.
Great. And I'll mention that for more information, and I'll drop the link into the chat after our talk, you can find the full data set at news-navigator.labs.loc.gov with a bit more description on these different modes of access as well. I'll go ahead and turn to the search application, which really was the second phase of the project, as I had mentioned, which really tried to answer this question of once we have this data set that has been extracted and made available in these various methods, can we actually try to really lower the barrier to access by producing an actual search interface where users can begin to browse? And so we ended up, I spent much of the summer into the fall of 2020 developing this search application, which is an interface for about 1.5 million photos from the Newspaper Navigator dataset. And in addition to trying to support sort of canonical keyword search over captions, also really tried to incorporate some modes of visual similarity search as well, allowing users to train what we call AI navigators to retrieve visually similar content based on photos that are being identified of interest to different users. And here we're really exposing the machine learning training to the user, and training and predicting on all 1.5 million photos is pretty instantaneous, less than a second round trip. And so as an example here, you can imagine curating a search for baseball players where you progressively steer this AI navigator toward images that you are interested in, away from images that you're not interested in. And on the right-hand side, the ones that are being returned are actually being retrieved without any sort of notion of what the underlying caption says. This is being done entirely based on the image itself. And in the interest of time, definitely won't show a demo, but you can find it at news-navigator.labs.log.gov/search. And I think here's where we really started to encounter some of the really difficult questions about how we make the search application accessible. I should mention for context too that doing this project with LC Labs was, I think, important context in the sense that we were thinking about building out this as an experiment. So really trying to get a version of this up and online and hosted in as short of a turnaround time as possible, while also really trying to take into considerations some of these broader questions about how we can create something that's sustainable and low maintenance and beyond. So I'll read off these sort of 3 questions that emerged, and then again turn it over to Chris in terms of some of the solutions that that Chris and John Foley in IT design and development were able to really, I think, navigate in an incredibly efficient way. So the first question was, how do we create a sustainable solution for deploying the search application with low maintenance requirements, especially with this understanding that this was being effectively added to IT design and development's plate. It wasn't part of the sort of core operations, and wanting to make sure that it could be deployed and not too much of a nuisance in that regard. Second, how do we handle issues surrounding load at launch without overpaying the rest of the time? And the idea here being that when we launched the search application in September of 2020, we knew that there would be a spike in traffic that would eventually decline, and trying to make sure that we both made had load balancing available so that it wouldn't crash on launch, but also we weren't overpaying, 6 months out. And lastly, thinking through the fact that this, incorporated real sort of interactive machine learning and required, all the kinds of memory and beyond constraints in order to keep this search application running. How do we ensure that this is done properly? And so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chris again for some of these solutions.
Yeah, thank you. So the answer that we were basically coming up with here is reducing the number of things that we have to be directly operating for everything to keep working. So the static Newspaper Navigator website, we designed that all around managed cloud services so that that site scales effectively, infinitely, with no ongoing operations on our part. The search service required a little bit more work because that needs custom code running. And the 2 things that really worked well off the bat were the containerization, which took a little bit more work to set up that and the automated build process, but it meant that now we don't need to go back to Ben with questions anytime something needs updating there, because we know exactly how to build it. That's what we do periodically throughout the year. It's automated, and if a given service happens to fail, it can automatically be redeployed from the previous image with no human intervention required. So we really tried to make it so there's nothing that involves getting somebody out of bed early in the morning, or especially making it so there's only one person on Earth who knows how to fix a particular thing. We've been trying to avoid that. The Amazon Fargate hosting option was especially nice for this because it means that we don't even run the host servers. We are only responsible for the containers that are running there. And then it worked well with our auto scaling policy. At launch, we had more instances running, and then over time, those fluctuate up or down based on how heavily people are using the service.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. And I guess we'll sort of wrap up here with talking a little bit about what we've seen in the search application since we deployed it. And I think this is evidence for the fact that the solutions that were created have been really successful in terms of maintenance and sustainability. And so the search application has been running now continuously for over 2.5 years. We've supported over 42,000 unique user sessions to date. And we've seen engagement from really wide audiences, which has been one of the most exciting parts of the project. Beyond sort of scholars or researchers thinking about this in an academic context, we've seen teachers and students in the classroom, genealogists, and more broadly, just members of the American public engaging with Chronicling America through Newspaper Navigator. I'll mention that more usage statistics here will be forthcoming, but did want to sort of end on that note about sustainability. In terms of resources for the project, again, I'm more than happy to drop these in the chat, but all of the code for the project as well as, is available on the GitHub repo for the project, including the fully containerized search application. And we just want to wrap up by saying thank you to so many people at the Library of Congress for collaborating on this and making the project possible, including, of course, LC Labs, NDNP, IT Design and Development. And also, I'd like to thank my advisor, Dan Weld at the University of Washington for everything as well. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and turn it back over.
Great, excellent. We'll get ready for our last presentation of the afternoon. Just go ahead and spotlight folks and we'll be ready to go. And a reminder to attendees that, you can add your questions into the Q&A and we'll get to them in about 15 minutes. And if the next presenters want to turn on your cameras, I'll be able to spotlight you.
Ready.
Perfect.
Amazing. I'm gonna share my screen so you all can see the amazingness. So first off, hello. Welcome to Web Archiving with Browsertrix Cloud. Thank you to the DLF team for this opportunity, for all of you joining us, and for all these presenters for letting us share this platform. Everything has been amazing. And thank you to my colleagues who are able to join me. My name is Lorena Ramirez-Lopez. I'm community manager for webrecorder. Our front-end engineer, Sua Yu, couldn't join us, but they are the ones focused on Browsertrix Cloud. So thank you, Sua. They're here in spirit and in code. And I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves. Ilya, if you want to start.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ilya Kreymer. I'm the lead developer of the webrecorder project. And yeah, excited to be here and share some of our work with you.
Hi, I'm Henry Wilkinson. I am the lead designer of Browsertrix Cloud and I guess webrecorder in general, but that's where most of my focus is at the moment.
All right, so let's start. I'm just going to drop the link in of our website because from the beginning, the goal of webrecorder has been to build quality open source tools to enable web archiving for all, to allow anyone with a browser to create their own web archives and to accurately replay them at a later time. So the goal for webrecorder tools is to provide a highly accurate capture and replay of websites working with a variety of existing storage options and services. So we truly believe that web archiving should be for all. And the webrecorder project builds tools that specializes in a user-driven form of web archiving, where the user is able to direct the archiving process through their browser. These are just some of the tools we have, and the highlight for today is our newest tool, Browsertrix Cloud, which we want to use our remaining time for the demo. So, Henry, take it away.
All righty. It's a fun screen sharing musical chairs here. All righty. So today we're going to briefly look at setting up a crawl with our cloud-based web archiving platform, and we are going to web archive part of the DLF website for this conference because, like, hey, how much fun is that? So we'll select a new seeded crawl. We've got two options. One of them, if you already have like a whole list of URLs, you can just plonk it in and the crawler will chunk through them all and spit out a web archive of everything you told it to. But if you don't know exactly what you want to capture yet, we will go over that right now. So we'll paste our URL that we want to start from here. We'll say that all pages within this website on this domain will get captured. So anything from forum2022.diglib.org. We will not tell it to include anything outside of that. So we've got this handy little thing where, like, if you have other links on your website, say to your Twitter profile or, you know, social media, whatever, any other website that's linked on your page, you can capture that to sort of get a complete archive of all of the content on a website, both on the website and sort of one level outside of it. But we won't do that today. We also have a number of ways that you can sort of limit the crawl. There's even more on the last page, but in the interest of time, it can get incredibly specific. So it's sort of complex to develop a system that allows people to crawl exactly what they want. There's many a setting. Hopefully all of our help texts over here on the side will help you with that. But today we will limit the max number of pages, and we'll say that we just want to capture sort of 20 of them. And we can go ahead and go next here. The Browsertrix Cloud system has a sort of novel feature, as far as I'm aware anyway, called browser profiles, which let you log into specific websites like social media in order to bypass things like login requests. So you may have experienced in your lives, if you're on Instagram or if you're on Twitter, sometimes these sites only let you sort of scroll to preset amounts, and then they're like, hey, you got to log in to continue using it. And that presents a real challenge for web archivists trying to capture that content and record it. So what we let people do is we let people log into those websites through a virtual machine in the browser, and sort of log into those websites and save a profile that can then be used by the crawler here. So if we wanted to select one of these, if we were archiving Facebook or archiving Twitter today, that's where we could do that. We can also turn on ad block here, and we can set the browser's language. So if you have a website that displays in a different language based on the user's set language, you can choose that here. All of our workflows that we set up are schedulable, but of course we want this one to run immediately so we can see it. We can also give it a name. We'll say DLF example. We can give it a description to provide sort of details about what the workflow is set up to do if you're working with other people. And we can also add some tags here. So we'll add like DLF and conference. So there we go. We've got our config all set up. We'll hit the save and run crawl button. And now what that's going to do is it's going to spin up computers in the cloud that will automatically run browser windows that will scroll through our content. And we're going to see that once that happens in a couple of seconds here. Usually they take a little bit of time to start up. So I will have to stall as best I can while this happens.
The website's shy.
Yes, and here we go. So now we can see that each of our sort of instances has started capturing content, and we have a list of URLs that will be captured next. So you can see what's going to happen here. And we can see this as it goes. It will start loading the page, and it basically can scale higher than this, even if you wanted to do it faster. So it looks like we're going pretty good here. We've got 5 out of 20, and it looks like all the stuff is loading reasonably well. So that's pretty cool. We'll wait for this to finish up. Of course, on longer websites, this process can go for quite a long time. So as long as it's working as you expect, and the URLs in the queue are also what you would expect, we have ways of paring that down if they're not. But you can sort of just leave it, go have a coffee, talk with your coworkers, set up other archiving jobs. So it looks like we're almost through the queue here. Now it's going to the last couple of pages in the windows. So now it's packaging up all of the resources that it just downloaded into the sort of final deliverable file that we'll be able to view in just a moment. Live demos are always fun because you get to like wait for things to load. That's my favorite part of conference talks. It's enthralling stuff.
It's also good, I think, sometimes when it's happening and it takes a while. It's like, is it just me? It's like, no, it's not just
Oh
you.
no,
It
it's
happens.
working really hard. This process was really important. So now that it's done, we have the replay crawl tab. And what we can do is we can go to our website. And right now in this browser window, which I could make full screen, but will this work with Zoom? Oh, it looks like it will. So right now in this browser window, what we're viewing is not the DLF website. It is an archived copy of the DLF website within our own system. And more specifically, it's 20 pages of this website. So if we go to like what resources frequently asked questions, oh, that one we did get, that's pretty cool. But some of these might be missing if they, the crawler just didn't happen to get to them. Like here, that one. Looks like we don't have that one in there. Also, another thing that we won't have, because we didn't select the sort of one hop out collect pages that are linked outside of the scoped URL, is the social media links down here. So if we try and visit Twitter, we don't have Twitter in this archive. You could go and you could crawl Twitter again yourself, and you could capture that content, or you could reconfigure the crawl if you really wanted that. And that is sort of the end-to-end capture to viewing pipeline that we have set up. Many other sort of organizational features that are currently in development, but those we're not quite ready to show off today. What we would like to show off today, however, is some of the interesting ways that people have used web archives. And so for that, I will pass it off to Ilya.
Thanks, Henry. Yeah, so I know we're kind of very short on time, so I'll be very quick. What I want to show is some of the different ways that you can use what web archives created through this system. And what one of the main keys of this system is that the files, the archives are created in a format that is portable and exportable, and then publishable into other systems. So, for example, this crawl that Henry just finished is downloadable as a WAXZ file, which is a new format that we've created. And I can actually, so we've crawled 332 megabytes. I can download that locally, and then I could actually load it in our viewer called Replay Web Page. And this is also the same viewer that's embedded here. So it's actually the same exact system. This whole viewer is accessible from as a standalone viewer that can be embedded into other sites. And so in the interest of time, I'll just go ahead and show some of the different examples of others using these archives in existing systems. So one such example is a collaboration we did with Stanford University Press, where all of their digital publications were archived and then published as a static site. So for example, when I click on one of these, it shows a viewer that is showing an archive that was created with an earlier version of the system. And this is entirely interactive, and it's all loaded from a single WAXZ file that can be downloaded from the system. Another option is, we also have a demo that was created via Glitch. So we actually have a little starter Glitch setup where users can upload WAXZ files and it'll generate a page similar to this one. Here we're showing Twitter and YouTube videos. Another integration was with the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive, where we actually have archives that are added as a custom type, and the viewer is also accessible as part of of their digital repository. Yeah, and so our goal is to kind of make these tools available and to support institutions and libraries in creating archives that they can then export and integrate with existing digital preservation and library repository systems. And with that, I think, yeah, I'll pass it back to Lorena for any closing words.
I think we're good. I've been sending out links in the chat, and I have 2 more with that glitch specifically, but I think
Awesome.
we're good. Ilya.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks so much. So I'm going to remove the spotlight from everyone, and then at least I'm going to try to. There we go. And so, yeah, if all of the presenters would like to turn on your cameras, we can move to Q&A. I know some have been answered a bit, but I'm still going to go through them just in case our attendees aren't following along in the Q&A, and just to make sure we can get them captured in the recording. So the first question that came through that I noticed was for Todd, who has answered this, but I'm just going to ask you to answer it verbally as well. The question was, what is the tech stack for the front and back end?
Sure. So really the new front end is there's bits and pieces that are everywhere. So we use both Postgres SQL Server for a database, but we're also reading in, actually METS files and things like that right into Elasticsearch as it's doing its indexing. So we're using Elasticsearch with our React.js front end, but then using, for some of the framework there, and then Nginx is doing some of our web serving and load balancing. For the back end of the new production system, we're still sort of in developmental phases of that. We're getting a lot of the feed from the existing old backend is still feeding the front end. That old system is a Microsoft SQL database serving, a .NET with written in C#, and it's really aging out. So we're really moving to try to get a stack that people coming right out of a computer science degree would be familiar with. A lot of the, we're writing a lot in Python and things like that right now for different components of it. So trying to keep it as developer friendly as possible. And because we just know that there's going to be probably continual turnover of developers, even though we might be lucky to keep them 3 to 4 years, that'll be great, but there's going to be a rotation there.
Great, thanks so much. So the next 2 questions are for Avis and David, and I'm going to ask them together because they're very similar questions. The first one is, has the community taken any steps to offer reparations or acknowledge this? And the other question is, how has the Quaker community responded to the Manumission project?
They're not all that happy about having their dirty laundry aired.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think it's been a pretty mixed bag of reviews from people who are Quakers. I think there's some people who feel somewhat supportive, but I think maybe are much more like cautious about exactly how they would phrase things. And yeah, in that way, it can feel difficult, like a lot of tone policing occurring. I think there are some folks who like individually might want to contribute funds or money, especially to the project in terms of like getting the research done at Howard. But there hasn't been like a talk of like systemic reparations occurring. I think, but that is something that like this project obviously begs the question of. And I think in our slide, we had a Pandora's box that opened, and thinking about, yeah, once you start a project like this with the community, in what ways are we now responsible to that community to continue following down that path of the Pandora's box that opens of reparations? Yeah.
Well, they didn't pay me for my my services, and I reminded them they did me just like they did my ancestors, worked them to death, and their kids and their kids and their kids with no compensation. So I'm not all that happy, but I'm still going to try to find them.
Great, thanks for that answer. I'm going to jump now to another question that's been answered in text, but just want to say it here. This one's for Henry. Is this something that has to remain open, or can you put your computer to sleep and come back? And this is about the web recorder.
Yes. Very quickly for Avis, a small part of me hoped that that would be a different answer, that like, oh yeah, they responded very positively. And yeah, oh well. Can you put your computer to sleep? Yes, it all runs on our sort of cloud servers, so that's outside of your computer on our end. The whole archiving process is not actually running within your browser, and so yeah, you can put your computer to sleep. You can walk away, as long as the crawl is behaving as you would expect. Which, if you really want to go into it, there can be a number of sort of things that will come up in terms of how it's capturing URLs, and if the website is correctly being archived, that you may want to check before you like walk away and take a hike. But yes, you can totally do that.
Great, wonderful. Okay, back to Todd. Let's see. This person is curious to know the strategy and workflow on how they condense their boutique collections down from 900 to less than 500.
It took a lot of work, and actually I can't take hardly any credit for it. My previous supervisor, who's now moved on, Lori Taylor, who some of you may know her name, she, I don't want to say badgered, but came up with a pretty good system where we would basically get the list of a spreadsheet of what collections belonged to who we thought the curators were for them, because some of these were pretty old. Sent them to them, really wanted them to look at it, review the language for their collection, update them. A lot of these were collections that someone thought would grow. So, oh, I'm going to start out with 10 items and that needs a collection because it's going to be big. Well, that was 12 years ago and it's still 10 items. So having the people review that now and say, actually, they just belong in this broader one, or they combined a bunch. They got them really to evaluate. We gave people months to do this, but we did sort of give them a deadline. One of the ways we were trying to be a little bit heavy-handed was when we started developing the new system, we actually started at that point and said, we don't want to put your collection actually visible. Not it would be visible as a content, but actually don't put it on the list of collections until you've got this back to us in the new system. So really, we're putting the new collections up on the new system, but we want you to actually review and update that. And actually that led to a lot of cleanup because there was a lot of these orphan collections with minimal content in each of them that really just didn't need its full collection again. But that's really I don't think it's easy. And I think we just lucked out that we had people willing to do some of the work to do it.
Great. Thanks so much for that. We have one more question, and if folks have others, please continue to put them in the Q&A. This one is for Avis. It says, it's great that you followed up with the attendees who did not attend. Do you have advice for other institutions that might wish to pursue similar community engagement?
Pray to God, because this is some hard work, y'all. Librarians, y'all got a hard job pulling up for real historic stuff. And now look, it's up and we dealing with it now. Y'all doing some important work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. There aren't presently any other questions in the Q&A, but I don't know if any of the panelists have questions for each other. I know it's hard to be sort of on a Zoom session and presenting, so if there are any questions that you all have for each other or anyone who's typing now, I'll keep an eye on the attendee Q&A as well. Yes, Avis, go ahead.
Oh, I thought we was in school, so I just was waiting to be called on.
No, I appreciate it very much. I love it.
Professional librarians and archaeologicals, is that the word? Archivists. You see where I'm at. What would you think to move forward with this? Thank you.
I actually have a question for Avis and David, if that's okay. I love the process and, just using the resources that you have and also the bandwidth and time. Are there any of your collections and any of your findings that has only been like a digital version where like the physical is gone because, fire or water and someone only took a photo and it's on a website? Is there any account of those digital assets to be part of the collection?
I don't think there are any like digital only assets at this point. There was, right as I started my work at Haverford, there was a migration to a renovated library. And during that time, there was a misplaced book that we did have the scans for. But that book has now been found. And we did already have the scans for it. So as far as I know, I think all of the manumissions at Haverford are digitized and accounted for at that archive. There is still maybe potential Quaker records to explore at Haverford and digitize, but I don't think there's any like digital only records or records that have been lost that were once in the archive. Yeah, thankfully.
But you asked an important question, because if I had been pulled in the beginning of this, when they was looking through all them papers to find that the enslavers family, they wrote a lot of stuff. And if they looked in there, they ain't had nothing to do but complain about what their slaves did. It's a lot in them records.
Mhm.
The American Quakers, they had the slave ships. They insured the slave ships. They took them to Africa. And they got a record of all that. One thing that Quakers are, is great record keepers. Excellent record keepers. And if somebody just go in there and look, nobody didn't think to look because they was saying they was abolitionists. I kind of feel like I'm on an okie dokie, that can't you see the light in me? He said I'm doing all right. My heart is just beating so fast, y'all.
You're doing great, Avis.
Don't.
I think I can speak for everyone that you're doing amazing. You all have done such an amazing job. We have just a couple more minutes, but I don't see any questions. So I'll leave just half a second in case there are any sort of last minute additions. Okay, well, I think we can go ahead and close the session. So thank you again so much to our presenters for these wonderful presentations. As you all know, we are recording today's session, so we will put that on Clear and DLF's YouTube channel in the coming weeks. We do have one more of these sessions happening tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time, so come on back for that one if you'd like. And as a reminder, our call for proposals for our in-person events in St. Louis in November are open through May 1st. So we hope to have the chance to see you there. And there's a link in the chat to the calls for proposals. So please submit something. We hope to see you. And thanks to everyone for attending. Thanks again to all of our presenters, and we'll see you soon. Have a great rest of your day.